Welcome back, everyone. This is the fourth episode of Kerbin Skies, my Kerbal Space Program career. And we have been recovering from some very major setbacks, a lot of launch failures. We are about to unroll the Capricorn project, which is launched atop the mighty Goliath rockets. We actually have two spacecraft here. Actually, only one of them is a Goliath. The second launch, the Capricorn Rendezvous vessel, is launched atop of a Tau. It is a slightly different configuration, running some experimental systems, but we're going to launch the big one first. This line has been not very well tested, to be honest, but it is very capable, and for this mission we are taking Valentina by herself. Now, there's a reason for this. This is a two-person capsule. We are going to practice rendezvous. Our job is to do a crew transfer in orbit. And this is the capsule that's going to take both Kerbals home. This is basically the Block 1 of the Capricorn module because at the moment I am fighting part count. I'm saving up to upgrade the vehicle assembly building, but until I can do that, I'm limited to 30 parts, and I believe the launcher by itself is 21. So that's why it's a pretty minimalistic design at the moment. Its capabilities will be greatly expanded once I get the VAB upgrade. But, I'm okay with this. This is, the incremental steps of advancing technology here. Now, if you're wondering why the heck I was just burning retrograde and putting my periaps back inside the atmosphere, that is because this upper stage really wasn't designed to stay in orbit. I'd rather not clutter up Kerbin. I've been doing a little bit of it, kind of by necessity. I've got some trash in space in orbit. I'd rather stop doing that. Let's not hit that, please. Oh, hit it. Oh, I hit that. Well, hopefully it didn't damage the heat shield. So what I'm going to do here is just let it go and turn around and put Capricorn back in orbit by itself. Just goes to show that this launcher was actually designed to lift a bit heavier Capricorn. Incremental technology and all that. Speaking of which, this is launching on a Tau rocket, and it's the rendezvous vessel, and it has all of the RCS and monopropellant and all that we need for an orbital rendezvous. I mean, it doesn't need a dock. I don't have docking ports unlocked, but it would be really nice to kill relative velocity and experiment with RCS and all that. Work out the ins and outs of this technology. And like I said, I'm struggling with part count. This is why the Tau rocket has a much lower part count, so it's easier to handle via number of parts that RCS involves. The only problem I have with this is the upper stage is pretty painfully obvious. That really ought to be in a fairing, but again, I don't have the part count. Now, this capsule does not have even a parachute or a heat shield. It cannot re-enter on its own. This is highly dependent on the crew transfer that is planned for this mission. Here we are with the Capricorn capsule. The rendezvous vessel just doesn't have a lot of Delta V since it was launched on such a small rocket. I'm conserving its RCS fuel for the actual rendezvous, so the Capricorn capsule will do most of the orbit maneuvering by itself. It's got plenty of fuel. Orbital rendezvous is starting to get a little bit routine, but this is the first time that actual living Kerbals have been involved, so a little extra care is taken not to, bump into each other too hard. We will be attempting a crew transfer here. Valentina has a seat ready for Bob. This is Bob's first time in space, and let's just say Bob probably would have preferred to have another volunteer go up, but well, they couldn't afford it. So Bob's rendezvous craft, well, it has an automated probe core that has done all the flying so far. Bob has been a passenger in his own rocket. As much as he trusts his own creations, I'm pretty sure he will be much happier with Valentina, an actual Kerbal, at the wheel, so to speak. I'm pretty sure rockets don't actually have wheels. Unless you mean reaction wheels, of course. Anyway, we're getting off topic. This is Bob, well, technically his computer, making the final approach here. Just gonna get in nice and close and kill that relative velocity with a bit of RCS. Eventually, this RCS technology will be incorporated into the main Capricorn vehicle, along with, I'm sure it will have plenty of other cool features, like, science, and possibly the ability to land. That is in proposal, but we're not sure how effective that's going to be yet. First things first, though, let's get Bob out, do a little bit of science, and let's have a look from his perspective through this tiny little window. See if we can get a glimpse of the Capricorn over there. There it is, just a few meters away, easily capable of that little jaunt through space. Bob's first EVA here, probably his first of many. Get that little RCS pack going, and just jet across the void. Valentina is no doubt giving him some flying tips from her vantage point out the window. Anyway, this goes off pretty smoothly. Hop back in there, and our orbital transfer is a success. Meanwhile, back at Mission Control, they're running the numbers with Bob and realizing the spacecraft in orbit has lots and lots of Delta V left, and we have a contract here. Go on an orbital spacewalk in orbit of the moon. Now, Valentina has already been to the moon and been on EVA, but if you'll recall, she was not actually in orbit. This is well within the capabilities of the spacecraft in orbit right now, so I don't see why we don't just take this to the moon and back. Now, in real life, this kind of on-the-fly mission profiling would be completely inadvisable. The Gemini missions that inspired Capricorn were much slower. They took things at a very careful pace and just incrementally explored the capabilities of the technology of the time. And Gemini never went to the moon. Now, there were proposals, as I understand, the idea of taking a modified Gemini spacecraft to the moon was on the table at one point. But, as we all know, that glory fell to Apollo. Here we have Bob stepping out and getting some science, and this is no new science here. Yeah, Block 1 Capricorn does not have any science to speak of, instruments or anything. Just making a quick little burn here to put ourselves in orbit. And now our EVA will actually count the contract. Unfortunately, we're not really going to get much science here. Due to the highly eccentric nature of this orbit, we will not be spending a lot of time low over the surface, which is where, each individual biome is its own specific EVA report. Just got Bob and Valentina. Valentina is jumping out to confirm her world record as one of the first to go on EVA near the moon. And with that, we are about ready to head back to Kerbin, so just get a maneuver note here and figure out an efficient way to do this ejection burn. Now, having completed 2 contracts with the same spacecraft, 2 very big contracts, I am no longer concerned about the VAB. At this point, it's just a matter of taking a couple weeks to construct it. And after that, part count will no longer be a constraint, at least until we get to some crazy part count, complicated spacecraft and all that. But for the most part, we'll be able to launch everything we need. And we are falling down into Kerbin's gravity well, inevitably to be captured by its atmosphere, speeding in at translunar velocities, but this heat shield was designed for the job. And we are going to need to ditch this stage. There we go. Now, there is another mission I would like to try. Well, we did try it once, but it had a launch failure, and that is the unmanned Moonlander probe. I'll give that another shot here very soon. We have a couple of comm satellites, That's another thing that we can definitely improve upon with a proper launch. Yeah, once the part count restrictions and the launch pad weight limits are lifted, it's really down to how much you can afford to launch and how you want to design your mission architecture. As for Bob and Valentina, it looks like they're going to have a perfectly safe re-entry here. Bob looks very happy about that. Splashdown! Well done, folks. Well, now we have a contract to explore the moon some more. This one is to land and plant a flag. Now, the unmanned probe can't plant a flag, but it's a step in the right direction. We do, after all, want to make sure that it's possible to touch down safely on the surface of the moon. It's not going to explode or anything, and we want to make sure gravity does the same things there that we expect on Kerbin. Here's our tech tree. Doing pretty well. I would really like extendable solar panels pretty soon, but need more science for that. Well, let's go get some then. Here's our moon lander. We are launching at night again, kind of unfortunate. It was well positioned for a launch to the moon, but not necessarily for your viewing enjoyment. I typically prefer to launch during the day for that. The timing of the launch has to do with the location of my satellites. We don't really want a repeat of the last attempt at a moon lander. All in all, this launch is quite nominal. Everything goes as expected, and we're coming up at the moon in this nice polar orbit, and that will allow us to pick a really good landing spot, I think. As it turns out, we're slinging a ways past the moon, waiting for contact with Kerbin. Once we get that signal, we can start burning to capture around the moon, and then hopefully find ourselves a nice flat landing spot where, again, we get signal from Kerbin. As I start burning, though, I realize what happens to my orbit a little later. It's going to intersect the moon again, and it's going to get much closer. And at first I think that's just too risky. I'm not going to, swing around again. I might not have control. But then I look at how far away it is, and it's actually about 6 hours, just a little over 6 hours, which means Kerbin will have rotated once, and if I have signal now, I'll have it then. And this ends up working just perfectly. Just swing around in here, and intersect the moon again, get this nice, even tighter polar orbit, and this time, best part of all, it's in line with Kerbin. Like, I'm coming over the moon, appearing on Kerbin's side. And that means wherever I land, I'm going to have line of sight. And I'm coming right over these polar lowlands, and they're super flat. It's this perfect landing spot. I could not have planned this better, literally. I do not have the planning skills for this, but it just worked out so well. So now, all I have to do is not crash. Easy, right? I think this engine only gives me... yeah, my thrust to weight is plenty high for this. Only about 8 kilometers up, and still traveling a couple hundred meters per second relative to the surface. Lateral velocity is looking pretty good. We are coming down over the northern basin, it's called. And watching that suicide burn distance, only a couple thousand meters. Gotta time this just right. Only a few hundred meters. And I'm gonna start burning a little early. And throttle up. Our velocity is quite low at this point. Much lower, and it's all lateral velocity. I don't have time to correct for that. I just gotta wait for the moon's gravity to bring me down. Very, very carefully. Only about 30 meters up now. Couple meters per second, and... so close, so close, so close. Come on! Touchdown! We made it. We have signal from Kerbin. We have sunlight on our solar panels. We have science. We've got it all. Mission is a complete success with plenty of fuel left over. Ladies and gentlemen, this was epic. A moon landing for the history books. Unfortunately, we didn't get a flag planted. We'll have to bring back a Kerbal for that. But there's some question as to how I'm going to go about doing that. The next phase of the Capricorn may just be a lander, because I am not entirely certain I want to wait for 2.5-meter rockets. I'm not sure if my funding will hold out that long. The good news is, the vehicle assembly building upgrade means we are no longer restricted by part count, and the mass limits on our launch complex are plenty high enough. I'm certain that we can do this with a Goliath launch, maybe with a couple strap-on SRVs. Here's what I came up with so far. This is a lander that actually has a separate stage. I was trying to cram that Delta V into a relatively narrow space that doesn't look horrible when I put it in a fairing. Got Bill there checking out the systems. And one of the things I want to see is, because the ends of those fuel tanks are clipped into the sides a little bit, I just want to make sure they're not going to explode when I stage them. Not sure I like how that jumped. In other news, this thing is fully decked out with life support, good communications, and the final model will have a computer on board to do the piloting, so I can actually send a scientist all the way to the moon. Yes. Completely by himself in this tiny little capsule. You know what? I'm not doing that again. Val says, if we're going to the moon, we're doing it in good company and style. If you've been watching my series so far, thank you. I know it takes some patience with a new YouTuber like me. Hopefully you enjoy something. I'd welcome any feedback. Feel free to leave me a comment. Let me know what you'd like to see improved or done differently. I'll look into it. See you guys next week. I'll be in the VAB.